The morning the HOA president tried to break into my house felt like a prank, and then like a threat, and then like the beginning of a very bad movie I hadn't auditioned for. It was 7 a.m. I'm barefoot in the kitchen, coffee in hand, and Delilah Thornwick blonde bob blazer so crisp it could cut bread was jamming a master key into my deadbolt while snarling at me through the window like she'd been cast as Suburbia's villain. "Open this door right now," she screamed, dialing 911 like she was ordering takeout. I put my mug down and watched her melt down. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as an HOA problem and started treating it like an emergency, because in my line of work, paperwork turns into danger if you ignore it. A little about me, Jake Morrison. 34 EMT, recently inherited a house from my Uncle Frank after a week that rearranged my life, divorce papers, funeral programs, the whole brutally timed package. Frank's house smelled like cedar polish and pipe tobacco, and the kind of stability you don't know you miss until it's gone. He'd been the neighborhood handyman for 30 years, the guy people called when life literally fell apart. I thought moving to Copper Ridge would mean sleep between shifts, maybe a garden, fewer sirens. I didn't expect a dictator with a clipboard. Delilah moved in like a chess player, bought a house in 2015, promptly ran for the HOA board, and started treating bylaws like commandments she wrote herself. She drove a silver Lexus with HOA Prez on the vanity plate and wore power like perfume. A week after Frank's funeral, she showed up to measure my fence 6.2 feet on my ruler. Regulation maximum is 6 feet. She said, then slapped a $2,500 fine on a fence my uncle had legally pre-approved years before. She called it elevated standards. She called my uncle's memorial wind chimes excessive noise. She wrote up a list of fines so creative they could have been performance art. At first I thought it was garden variety HOA pettiness. Then I noticed the pattern citations landed like confetti on people who were old or brown or single or veterans, folks less likely to know their rights or afford a lawyer. The Hendersons' purple mailbox untouched. The Johnsons' 6 feet 4-inch fence. No problem. My neighbor, Mr. Troy Korean, elderly, got hammered for his lanterns. Maria Santos, a single mom who babysat neighborhood kids to make ends meet, got fined for unauthorized childcare. The discrimination started reading like a roster, and my EMT instincts trained to spot patterns under pressure started screaming. I started documenting. Cameras, incident logs, dates, times, who was there, who called whom, because in medicine and in life, documentation is survival. Frank had taught me the trick of checking county records. When Delilah's team pulled out a laser measurer and announced my workshop encroached on a setback, I pulled up the records. Permits from 1987, legal setbacks of 10 feet back then, my workshop sat 12 feet from the line. Delilah's current standards supersede historical permits was a magic phrase that rewrote the world whenever convenient. Then Ethel Troy, the sweetest older woman you could meet, who smelled like jasmine and carried gossip like candy, knocked on my door one night, tea in hand, and whispered the thing that made my blood run cold. Master keys, midnight, entries, citations, left on kitchen counters. "He's been in my house 3 times this year. Rearranged my meds," she said. "Photographed my husband's war medals. Left notices." Frank had been fighting this, she said. He'd been collecting receipts and audio and financial records. He'd been building a case, and then he died before he could finish it. When Frank's shoebox of papers landed in my hands, bank statements, forged minutes audio of Delilah boasting about keeping standards, the story changed from harassment to conspiracy. Frank had been HOA treasurer. He'd traced money flowing from our HOA into Delilah's Consulting LLC. He'd documented every forged signature. He'd left an insurance policy, USB, labeled exactly that, a map of embezzlement that made my stomach flip. 2 weeks before all that, Delilah had escalated in a way criminals do when cornered, clumsy, desperate, and dangerous. She brought inspectors to my backyard, photographing Frank's workshop like it was a crime scene. She filed anonymous complaints from people she knew were out of town. She tried to bribe an honest county inspector to condemn my home. She called my boss and whispered stories designed to get me fired. When she poured sugar in my EMT van's gas tank overnight and then filed a police report accusing me of threatening her well that crossed the line from petty to criminal. But her worst mistake wasn't the van or the phone calls or the recorded boasts. It was assuming everyone was as complicit as she wanted them to be. She'd built a whole machine around victimizing the vulnerable, fake fines, fake liens, fake foreclosures, then offered payment plans that kept people trapped. Instead of hiding in plain sight, she'd been rewriting reality for so long that she started to leave fingerprints everywhere. I did what I knew how to do: triage the problem. I documented everything. I took Frank's files to Lisa Park, the estate attorney who'd helped Uncle Frank with his will, and had the surgical legal brain that smells fraud a mile away. Lisa found forgery on signatures, duplicated signatures that proved not coincidence but design. She'd been watching Delilah for a year. 12 other homeowners were in identical legal purgatory. We were victim number 13. The mini twists started to collect like evidence on a tray. Tommy Briggs, Delilah's 19-year-old nephew, showed up at my door one evening, shaken and small against the world he'd been pulled into. He'd been running errands, making fake complaints, forging minutes. He handed me a thumb drive and a confession audio of Delilah planning false flag report spreadsheets showing HOA money funneling into shell companies' techs, coordinating which neighbors to target. He wanted out. He wanted to do right. He wanted someone to fix what his aunt had broken. He became our inside source, and suddenly the whole operation looked less invincible. Then the state got involved. Frank had contacted the Attorney General before his heart attack. He'd left a note to be opened if Delilah tried to hurt the neighborhood. And that note contained the smoking gun. Every financial transfer, every bogus contract, the fact that the HOA hadn't been legally incorporated since 2016. In legal terms, that meant every fine, every lien, every threat since then was null. Delilah had been running a fake organization for 8 years, collecting nearly $1 million that evaporated into shell companies and offshore accounts. We called our operation Copper Ridge Justice. Lisa coordinated criminal complaints across agencies: state AG for HOA fraud, county prosecutors for embezzlement and forgery, FBI for mail fraud, and interstate money laundering, IRS, for tax crimes. Sarah Kim. A county reporter hungry for truth agreed to go public the moment arrests were made. We baited the trap carefully, bait obvious enough that Delilah couldn't resist, but recorded in cloud-based, tamper-proof files. Tommy wore a wire furnished by the AG's office. Mrs. Troy Maria Bill Kowalski, the veteran, documented entries, threats, and forged signatures. We pooled evidence like a medical team pooling resources for a complicated trauma. You learn the dark side of human nature when you see a predator cornered. Fear makes people stupid. Delilah panicked, cement in storm-drained social media smear campaigns, fake complaints to my employer that put me on administrative leave, attempts to bribe officials, and finally the dumbest, most self-defeating thing a criminal can do: have a map of your crimes and then admit to them on record. She recorded herself thinking she was documenting heroism. Instead, she narrated her crimes, minorities' lower neighborhood appeal. We target the elderly because they won't fight back. The tapes were poison. When federal agents froze her accounts and showed up at our community center with cameras rolling, there was a sound in the room like a long-held breath finally leaving. Delilah entered like she always had, entitled clipboard clutched, then watched as prosecutors played audio, flashed financial spreadsheets, and read the list of charges: embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, civil rights violations. The DBA she'd been hiding under had been invalid for years. Her consulting LLC was a funnel, not a service. Her HOA president title meant nothing when the corporation didn't legally exist. Watching her handcuffed while neighbors applauded felt like watching a bad infection finally get antibiotics. Justice isn't always cinematic, but this time it was. Her offshore accounts were frozen, her assets seized, her attorney disbarred for participating in legal terrorism. Marcus Webb, the man she hired to drown us in lawsuits, turned out to be a liability. His panic and sludge of frivolous filings handed prosecutors more evidence of conspiracy. Tommy Briggs got a scholarship and a second chance. We recovered funds. We rewired the system. 6 months later, Copper Ridge looked like what Frank always imagined: a place where people talked over fences, not through lawyers. We elected a new board with term limits and mandatory audits, live stream meetings, and multiple signatures required for any fine above a modest amount. We started a community fund for legal aid so the next predator can't prey on someone who can't afford a lawyer. Maria's kids got scholarships. Bill's PTSD eased as he helped tend the memorial garden that now held the wind chimes. Frank made those little brass tubes whispering through the trees, a softer, happier sound now. There's a lesson carved into the whole mess, not a sermon, just a hard-earned bruise. Power, when unaccountable, attracts people who treat authority like a tool to be weaponized. But the quiet, steady truth is that bullies need isolation to thrive. When neighbors stop being islands and start being partners, fraud unravels. When victims collect signatures instead of shame. When they trade fear for documentation, the predator's tricks become paperwork. Paperwork we can use to stitch things back together. And yes, there's a sweetness to watching karma serve a plate of consequences. Delilah Worthington, by the way, was her real name, led past rows of people she tried to destroy, clutching a clipboard now useless as a prop. The applause that followed was small, human, and oddly healing. We didn't celebrate cruelty, we celebrated community. We decided not to let what happened define us as victims, but as architects of something better. So here I am, years later, still an EMT living in a house full of friends and garden tools and wind chimes and, yes, dating the reporter whose stubbornness saved more than headlines. We rebuilt what was broken, not just fences, but rules, systems, trust. The change felt slow at first, then real dues dropped, parks fixed, and a legal aid fund that helps other neighborhoods pull their predators into the light. But I'll leave you with this. Did we do the right thing by organizing to force a powerful woman into prison? Or did we cross some line when we baited her with cameras and legal strategy? Is there ever a danger that in defending ourselves we become what we despise? I don't know. A neat answer. Only that unchecked authority invited cruelty and accountability restored community. Tell me what you think. Share a time you watched power go unchecked, or a moment when a community came together and actually fixed something. Comment below. Your story might be the thing that helps someone else stop a predator before they start.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.